Hi, everyone. My pleasure to be here again, now with the sound. All right. So, working on working again on bootstrapping with UTXO set snapshot. There are already 3 pull requests. I used abbreviation PR in the tweet. Accepted and merged into the codes already released. And there are like 2 or 3 pull requests more, so doing some performance optimizations now. Then I will propose functionality to dump and restore UTXO set snapshots. And then the last PR would be about networking messages. So in like 4 or 5 weeks, it will be reviewed and merged, hopefully. It basically opens possibility, right, to jump on the next piece of functionality, which is already implemented, but polishing is needed and so on, for bootstrapping with Nipopose, right? So maybe, the community is more informed about that. About bootstrapping with Nipopose, I'm thinking about like 2 months. From now, I mean, for polishing, reviewing, merging, so on.
Awesome. Can't wait to get the ultralight client. I guess 2 months soon, TM, right?
Soon TM. Hey, Joe. Well, guys, you know what? I think... So I've seen a couple of posts on social media around Rosen, and I think that even though there's quite a bit of information out there about how Rosen works and how it's different from, just from things like Wormhole and other bridges. I think there's still quite a bit of confusion as far as basically the base mechanics behind it, and also the vulnerabilities and how it's actually made to to counter or to actually eliminate the vulnerabilities that that other bridges have. So why don't you elaborate a little bit? Like, say, Joe, why don't you elaborate a little bit on that? I saw you engaged with some of these posts, but I just wanted to kind of set the record straight. First of all, what is the mechanism behind Rosen Bridge? So basically, it is not like Wormhole, and in some ways, it's slower but more secure. And also, why is it not, say, because I've seen some people say, oh, well, nothing's is gonna get hacked. It's gonna get hacked. Well, not really, because it's really difficult to hack a bridge like Rosen. So why don't you give a bit of a breakdown on that?
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Basically what a bridge is it's a way to wrap tokens, and you lock them on one chain, and essentially you mint a synthetic version that is stored in some secure wallet, ideally on the other side of the chain, right? And there's a couple of ways to do that. Sometimes you have custodial bridges, which, Rosen is a distributed custodial bridge, right? There's a distributed set of guards that are responsible for kind of the settlement, clearance, wrapping, and minting across chains. Sometimes there have been a couple of attempts to do that solely via smart contract, sometimes via proofs, and we've seen that exploited a few times via false proofs that have been, basically, they submit basically a false receipt and then withdraw tokens. And we get into this weird issue, right? Where you have smart contract logic on multiple chains, which usually requires multiple audits, which is, well, expensive. You also have different chains with different multi-sig schemes. That's been one issue in bridges where, you've had a faulty multi-sig scheme and then funds are lost. And so the thinking with Rosen was, how can we create a bridge that has clear assumptions, right? And I think that ultimately that's one thing in crypto that once you get beyond the, consensus layer, generally assumptions kind of fall apart. People don't care, but that's actually really important. Like, how can these things fail, right? So if Rosen fails, we'll understand how it failed. And, if you look at like the Ronin bridge or the Harmony One bridge, they weren't so distributed in terms of their, let's say, set of actors that needed to sign to clear and settle funds. I think in one, you needed 2 actors to sign, and then another you needed 4, right? Well, I know that in the preliminary testing, the guard set that Rosen is going to shoot for is between 20 and 30. And then we can say, okay, well, what percentage needs to sign in order for there to be, let's say, approval and then kind of activation of, locking, minting, all that good stuff. So when you get a larger distributed set, you have ideally clear assumptions from day one. I think that a lot of people have been caught up in the advertising of, a trustless bridge that needs 2 signatures, right? That's kind of terrible. But, nobody asked about the assumptions involved in that case. So Rosen is kind of built from the ground up for Ergo, right? And all of the logic that the bridge uses is going to be on the Ergo side in terms of smart contracts. So it's somewhat designed after the traditional method of kind of clearance and settlement. You have 2 groups of actors. One of them are called watchers, and what they do is they run infrastructure that looks at different blockchains and they look for events, right? And when an event happens, they basically post on the Ergo blockchain, hey, something's happening, pay attention. And then the guards, their job is to see the watchers have notified them and then verify that. So they'll then, either scan on Ergo or scan, another chain that's connected to Rosen to confirm that, indeed what is being, let's say, alerted, brought to their attention, has indeed happened. At that point, after they verified it, they sign. And when enough actors sign, it gives them the ability to start taking action in terms of bridging tokens, right? It's not designed to be fast. There's always that push for speed in the crypto space. And a lot of the times there are trade-offs, right, that are never talked about because, well, it's just not sexy to talk about, assumptions and trade-offs. But one benefit of Rosen being slow is you have multiple actors checking different chains at multiple heights. And so that kind of assists in terms of the, authenticity of the transaction in terms of whether a chain has forked or, there's been an issue. It just gives better assumptions when you have, let's say, that kind of distributed checking at different block heights. So the goal of Rosen, ideally, is to take tokens from Ergo, put them in other ecosystems where they can have some economic utility, access greater liquidity. And in vice versa, other chains will have the ability to wrap their tokens, send them to Ergo, and as our DeFi ecosystem comes out, is more developed, as privacy features are more developed, there's a lot of good reasons why users may want to consider using DeFi on top of Ergo. Aside from kind of the determinism and beauty of Ergo script itself, there's some nice functions that are possible for us to build into, let's say, the DeFi ecosystem that may be attractive to different traders or holders out there. And over time, if Rosen is bridged to, let's say, ADA, to BNB, to ETH, to Bitcoin, what we'll find is a kind of multiple markets existing. Right now on Ergo, we have Spectrum, which is, a great DEX. They've done a great job. But when you have multiple markets, you have the ability to arbitrage between price differences. And that's very attractive from kind of the active trader's perspective, because you have a profit incentive that you can always try to watch and participate in. So as Ergo comes to market across multiple ecosystems, it also gives the ERG token itself greater access to liquidity without us needing to go to a centralized exchange and, sign contracts, pay money, all that good stuff. So in a way, it not only expands what's possible for, us, it also brings in the potential to have a lot of other tokens flow into Ergo. So it's pretty exciting to see.
Right. So we have a question, just to clarify a couple of points on Rosen. Okay, and so X asks, how many confirmations does Rosen consider? Do the watchers and guards looking at different chains with different security and block times have a different perception of confirmation?
Yeah, so what you're going to have in that sense is a custom specification that the Rosen guards set for each chain that's going to be based on the assumption of finality of settlement, right? So you have different blockchains moving at different speeds with different block times, and they also have different assumptions in terms of how high, let's say, up the block header, finality occurs, right? And that's something that the guards themselves will set. It'll probably be part of the integration for each chain. So you can't really give a single answer to that, because if you're talking about Bitcoin, a lot of the times you have some that even try to claim like instant settlement and trade let's just say very fast. Then you have other chains where you have much longer finality times. So that'll just depend on the ecosystem that Rosen's partnered with. The beauty of that with Rosen is, you do need a certain amount of confirmations before, you can assume finality in blockchains. But even beyond that, it depends on how long it takes for the guards to verify it and sign, and that may come in at different times. Rosen's not trying to be like a instant arbitrage bridge. So far, that's been somewhat of an issue in the space, in my opinion. But ultimately, these things do break down to assumptions, right? I think it's wrong to say like this can't fail. It's more understanding the attack surface and how it can fail, and then trying to engineer ways that reduce that potential.
But less assumptions basically means more security, right?
Yep. And
so I think actually for the Rosen, it's needed to do maybe one pager, right, with comparison with wormhole and other solutions.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and also you got to remember that Rosen is also it's ergo-centric, but I think with some minor modifications, it could also be used for other chains than just Cardano and Ergo. And again, those assumptions, as you said, Joe, are kind of dialed in as per the relationship between the chains. So
yeah,
it's not
actually, it actually opens up like the potential. Like let's say that we have BNB or Binance Smart Chain and Ethereum that are connected to Rosen, right? You have the ability to move from Binance Smart Chain to Ethereum, and the logic itself will still happen on Ergo, right? But from the user's perspective, they don't even necessarily need to see that. So any Rosen like partner within the bridge, you can kind of hop between them, and that same verification process will still happen on the Ergo blockchain, but the user doesn't necessarily need to know that or visit Ergo. It's not like they need to go mint wrapped token on Ergo and then mint another wrapped token. So as the Rosen network expands, Ergo can at some point, in some transactions, actually just sit in the background and work. And, you get, Cardano to Ethereum, or, Ethereum to Binance Smart Chain, or, depending what the partner chain is. Ergo doesn't necessarily need to be in the forefront, but that's where the logic is being ran.
Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
Sounds good. So
indeed.
Well, I think we just need to have more materials like one pagers and so on. So I will push Rosen team. So I personally would like to see clear comparison. And so we'll jump on reviewing contracts in coming days, hopefully.
Great. So there is a good question here. It's actually something that I've been also looking into with Zengate. So, what impacts does Rollup Tech have on Ergo? Do Rollups have a future in Ergo, or is scaling simply better with sidechains and or a base layer? And again, I've also seen some discussions as of last week about sidechains versus L2. So some have said that sidechains are I guess, a waste of time in a way. So maybe you guys want to touch on that. First of all, just touch on Rollups and Ergo, and also what are your views on sidechains versus L2s?
Who would you like to go first?
Why don't you go first, Alex?
All right. Hard to say because, there are different designs, right? So for rollups and sidechains, at least in case of rollup, you have data availability, right, on layer one. Then the question, probably application specific, does that help or not really? Right, and for sidechain, so the main issue is consensus, right? I mean, how are you making progress there? But the same is for plasma rollup constructions, right? There are also different designs here, so it's kind of huge space, right, in regards with possible design. The design's been chosen, so I mean, it's better to compare concrete designs. But for many applications, I believe maybe either way works, right?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. It's hard to say because, when you get a side chain, I guess we have to define a side chain, which is in and of itself somewhat murky. it has its own consensus mechanism. And what is that? How distributed is it? It's hard to say, right? Without any concrete design you're looking at. And the same is true with rollups, where, you have how many sequencers are involved, how distributed is it? Is it, like a single party running the rollup? Is it distributed? It's hard to say. Like, you have to, I guess, get into the individual specifications of the design and pick apart the assumptions that are involved to really even know. Like, sidechain is such a vague term. It's kind of I don't know. I would say poor in terms of, like, even a definition. I guess to some degree you could say there's like this idea of like a parent and a child chain, where you have like one bigger ecosystem and then like one smaller side chain that's more ecosystem specific. But then as you get into interoperability, like if we bridge to Cardano, I guess Cardano's our sidechain, right? Or are we Cardano's sidechain? Or how do you know that? Because you have different, different consensus mechanisms, different purposes, but they're connected. So in a way, it's hard to even say, like, how does someone define a sidechain? A rollup is at least a little bit easier, because you inherit security from the base layer. But you also have some trade-offs. Whenever you get, like, I guess, these ways to make blockchains move faster, there's always some trade-off in terms of security and assumption that, I guess, is acceptable or not. But a lot of the times people don't even look or understand, like, the assumptions that they need to make. So
yeah, I mean, it's very important to understand that. Well, first of all, I do agree with you about the definitions themselves kind of being vague. I mean, it's kind of a buzzword, isn't it, in a way? Sidechains, because we want things to go faster, we want things to be asynchronous but not asynchronous. We want things to we want to have our own, like, sidecar in the big motorcycle type of thing, right? We want to have our own seat on the motorcycle, but still want to ride with the big boys.
We want the Web 2 experience in Web 3, right? And
right.
That's somewhat this most of the time.
Yeah, and this is what me and you, Joe, have been talking about as far as so Joe and I have been talking a little bit about potentially building a roll-up for Palmyra for what is being built at Zengate to make sure that we can handle the volume of transactions that are going to be coming in. And it's not just as easy as, like, okay, well, you make the blockchain go fast, you just make a side chain, and that, or you just make a roll-up and it'll make it fast. Like, well, yeah, but it doesn't it doesn't come out of thin air. So if you're making it faster, then you're sacrificing something else that made it slower on the main chain, right? So that made it slower if, say, we're using, say, Ergo or Cardano, and then we're all of a sudden making something that they can take in more throughput on the same, we're using the same tech, the same chain, but it's doing it faster. So that means that we're, say maybe sacrificing decentralization for federation speed.
Yeah. I say that, like, in the broader context of the market currently, like, L2s are probably winning in terms of adoption, but there's a pretty small subset of really successful L2s, and they're usually pretty centralized. So it's hard to say. I don't
Polygon, it's how do they, Ethereum doesn't scale. Okay, that made Polygon. Well,
there's a couple.
I mean,
there's a couple, but it's a pretty small group so far. But
but even with that, though, even with Polygon, I mean, that thing is, I wouldn't say it's like the the poster child for decentralization. Or if we look at, say, BNB, I mean, the thing's got 12 validators. I mean, that's, yeah, it's fast and it's cheap, but it's not really decentralized. I mean, 12 validators is better than one, but it's better than three. But you're still kind of, I mean, it's not even. I mean, it's barely federation. It's not even decentralization. So you just have to think about that. I mean, it doesn't happen out of thin air unless your network evolved and scaled naturally to meet the demand and went through all the hurdles of scaling and figuring what the community wants as far as, okay, well, we know we can't have everything, right? So what is more important to us? How do we keep our first principles and still create something that is more, I would say, mainstream viable for us to build stuff on, that is a replacement for the current system. Even going back to, it's not even really sidechain related, but just a good example of that, of things not really being viable as a replacement for the current system, was like, say, the Bitcoin network before Lightning network went into play. It's the transaction speeds and fees were so high. It's like, what is the point? What if you're actually, if you believe in like the core values of it, of course, yeah, it's just, you rather use that instead of the banking cabal. But in essence, if you're just thinking about it in a way, okay, I send payment, right? I want to send a payment from me to somebody else. Who do I use? Well, do you use somebody who has no security? Nobody you can call, right? Nobody you can call that charges the same amount of money as the bank would for a transaction, and sometimes takes almost as long as a bank does to do the transaction. Well, if you're just an average user, say, okay, what's the point? Why would I use that? So you have to really think about these things when you're creating these networks, and if it's not evolved naturally, then that's what happens. You want fast, well, you're not going to get decentralized. If you want decentralized, well, that's gonna slow things down, and you're gonna have to scale to be fast enough. Yeah, so that's it's always a trade-off. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. All right, so okay, this is a good question that I've seen some people ask. So, anyone know what the fees on Rosen will be?
Right now,
anyone like Joe?
Yep. On testnet, I don't know. I'm actually not on the Rosen team, right? I just answer questions because everybody else is busy building, testing. So I don't know what the team's going to set it at.
All right. All right. Well, maybe we can get some clarification later on from the Rosen team. We'll see what we can do about that. So here's here's another good question from Husky Dex. And again, this has been kind of there's been more fresh interest in Ergo, especially from the Cardano community lately, because of various discussions about staking, contingent staking, and whatnot. So here's a good question: is how would you explain in clear terms the benefits of Ergo for the end user? For example, someone that's enjoying the DeFi and NFT space on Cardano, why would they want to join Ergo? So, what is your elevator pitch, Joe?
Sure. If you're going to compare and contrast two things, which I guess they're asking me to do here, first I would say proof of work has a tendency to be more hard money versus proof of stake is more some social contract. One big difference between Cardano and Ergo is actually the fee structure. Ergo has kind of a traditional fee on demand structure where if you want to be included in block space, you need to pay. And there are some very big benefits to that, especially when we talk about, what we just ended, layer twos, right? If you have a layer two that can't, in essence, be paying a fee to be included in the block space, that layer 2 is going to have difficulty functioning. Cardano kind of has a weird, what is it, first in, first out structure, which, I think is probably going to need some revisions in order to support layer 2s and scaling. Now, that especially becomes important in the DeFi space. Like if I were to take a large collateralized position and I'm at risk of being liquidated, the last thing I want to do is wait in line, right? Because at that point, I would need to cover and close my position. And in order to do that, I need to get to the front of the line quick. So how do you accommodate that? You pay miners, right? And so that fee structure, I think, is probably long-term a much more viable path for DeFi and for scaling. Now, in terms of the NFT space, we do have two, let's say, marketplaces that enforce royalties, which, I know that artists and contributors, basically benefit from because, they get a portion of the resale fee. The other has to do with ABL trees and, kind of the authenticated data structure of that and, how it can assist in terms of off-chain proofs, which, maybe that's something that you can get into a little bit, Alex. I think that's something people don't grasp very well, which I guess that's okay. But it certainly would be good to hear your input in terms of the benefits of ABL trees. He might be muted.
Sorry. ABL trees is basically the way to build layer 2 aware contracts on the Ergo blockchain, right? So that's kind of native layer 2 support, actually. There are some examples already in regards with NFTs. There is example of off-chain bank, right? So some simple off-chain bank, right? Which is transferring tokens, but also publishing its state on the chain periodically, and then if the bank ceased to exist, then it's possible to withdraw the tokens. So it's kind of plasma, actually, right? The simplest plasma with centralized operator. Then it's possible to modify it easily to have federated control our plasma and so on. There are some designs published on the forum in regards with rollups and so on. I pushed for ABL trees to be included. Before, right, those rollups and plasma. Before known even, it seems the decision was right, and it was pretty clear back then, back in 2018. Somehow they would be useful for layer 2 solutions.
All right. Well, let's see. So we have okay, so there's a good question here. And so how do you see Ergo blockchain versus block DAG? Does it have an advantage over DAG? Why don't you start with that one?
Did you say me? I couldn't hear. I'm sorry.
I did say you, Joe.
Usually the difficulty with DAGs has to do with the amount of data that's being stored, right? There's everyone loves fast, it's sexy, right? But what comes with fast is all of this extra data that you need to store if you're going to run a full node. And usually what happens is you get some centralization, right? The easiest way to kind of create a trade-off there is you kind of have a hierarchy of nodes where, like, you could say, in some, you kind of will just have a central validator, and that's like the extreme case. The less extreme case, but still is a major trade-off, is you have people that aren't running full nodes because the weight of them is just too much for the average person to carry. So then you have someone that's running like some lighter infrastructure, and then somebody that's running like an archive or like a database somewhere that everyone else needs to trust. And over time, that centralizes, right? Because, if you have, let's say, a blockchain that starts to get into the terabytes and larger, a lot of people, it's hard enough to get them to run a full node, even when it's pretty light, right? But once you start to get heavier and heavier and heavier, it's just going to centralize over time. And, depending on how much data is actually being stored, which, if you have something that's like just for payments or settlements, that's one like level of data. But then when you get into the smart contract side and you have more data and transactions, that problem only gets worse. So you get into, I'm just going to call it the Solana problem. Everybody loves speed on layer one, but then what do you do with all that information?
You make some really, really large and impractical nodes.
Yeah, basically, you have to have a trade-off there.
Basically a supercomputer to run. Yeah, that's what happens.
What's your take, Alex?
DEX is one of the most mystical beasts in the space, I would say. The initial proposition was to have faster confirmations and higher throughputs, right? So for faster confirmations, soon, like in 2016. A paper appeared, co-authored by Hagelas, Professor Kias. That's actually, confirmation times would be even higher in the DEX setting. There is no need to sell that, right? If you are not a seller, salesman, about higher throughputs. I saw no any formal argument, and from engineering perspective, I don't think if still all the blocks are verified, right, then you may have a higher throughput. Actually, you may have lower throughputs, right, because you still need to validate all the blocks, right? So you need to validate back blocks and conflicting blocks. You usually do contain almost the same transactions, right? Instead of few ones which are in conflict and so on. And then you need to resolve a lot of complexities, right? Without clear results, the more interesting line of research then is to try to get sharding right. Sharding or something like that. So DEC probably is not quite useful, right? So, well, there is a sales pitch, but it doesn't correspond to reality, basically.
Anything you want to add to that, Joe?
No, I'm good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think here's a good question. So, is there anything that can be done to better incentivize long-term ergo miners?
Sure, that's always
Joe?
right now, in my opinion, the proof of works space is still consolidating after 95% of the market blowing up, right? It's an unfortunate reality that when ETH left, that's where the majority of the security subsidy came from. And so at that point, things consolidate. If proof of work is not profitable, right, that's a certain, I guess, economic incentive for some miners to sign off, take a break, step back. That is kind of a self-balancing act in proof of work, which I think in the long term is a big positive thing. But when we're in the period of let's say overcapacity in terms of GPU miners, it's painful, right? It's painful to have this equipment want to mine and then not be able to. So if somebody supports ERG and there's something out there that's more profitable to mine it and swap for ERG, right? That's kind of the proof of work I guess incentive there. Now, in terms of like everybody overall increasing their incentive, that's just a sign of overcapacity. I get that right now mining is not the most attractive thing, but you got to remember 95% of the workforce was fired and went home with their tools, right? Now they're competing against each other and they'll crowd each other out. So I do think that proof of work is getting even more interesting as like regulatory pressure increases, just because a lot of the times there's a better path to market. But right now, the kind of gatekeepers of liquidity in our industry, the exchanges, have not really gone out of their way to sufficiently work to replace GPU mineable coins via listings. So there's kind of in a way interfering with that healing process, versus if they were to open the market not just to Ergo but to multiple GPU proof of work coins, it would be the best thing that would create more incentives long term for miners. So I wish that miners were a little bit more organized and had a stronger voice in this industry. But also, that's kind of the benefit of mining, right? You just set up your rigs and then let them do their thing. And you don't have to worry about the drama. So I think the only thing that's going to really change that is time. Markets need to consolidate, right? That overcapacity isn't going to disappear overnight. I know there was, a lot of people that kind of went into the merge thinking that everything was going to be rosy immediately. I even tried to write an article at the time like, hey, there's going to be a period of consolidation. And the reality is, okay, we're 6 months or so on the other side of the merge. I think, this might be a 12-month process, maybe more. There's still a ton of capacity out there that just doesn't have the security subsidy as a whole to replace what was lost.
Yeah. We saw this, I guess, in a way when the merge just happened. We saw that it's just the lack of significant infrastructure from the entities that have the power, or not the infrastructure, but support from the entities that have the power to bring support and to kind of better the entire system. Just didn't happen. That's why you had quite a few, large farms, point here, point there. They kind of suck out as much value as they can, and they just move on, and then they kind of leave, the smaller chains like us in a pickle, because all of a sudden the hashing power is dropped like in half, and it's you're just there's just really no way to recover from that unless you make some serious sometimes not very, I guess, favorable or not very easy decisions.
Yeah, I would
it's.
I would encourage people to look at it from this. Okay. If you were to look before the merge, what was the net value of the security subsidy that was moving into market daily? In terms of how many millions of dollars of proof of work coins were, let's say, being mined per day, right? And then compare that to today, and what you'll find is there's still a drastic difference. And, until that equalizes to some degree, you just can't pay the same number of workers. It's just that simple. Even beyond Ergo, it's like the net outcome. The best way to increase that, in my opinion, is actually exchange access, but not just for Ergo. You have to look at proof of work coins as a whole and say, okay, as let's say a overall market, how do we repair that security subsidy that market used to be paying to miners? And once we reach that point, I will have essentially healed the market, in terms of the security subsidy that we had pre-merge, but we're not there yet. We're not even close. And, it's a shame to see. I'm kind of, unfortunately, a lot of exchanges are throwing their own bullshit products to market instead of supporting proof of work, but it is what it is. I think in time that'll.
Yeah, I mean, a new week, new centralized exchange all of a sudden comes out with their own build on this chain, and things will be easier for you on our exchange. Wink, wink. Change,
Totally.
And you look at the CoinGecko, CoinMarketCap, and you're like, what is this? Like, where did this come from? What is, like, who? Why do they have their own chain now? I mean, what was? I mean, I know why they have their own chain now, but it's like, okay, that's really helping things. That's not a cash grab. Yeah, it's but I guess the nature of the beast, the nature of the industry, as of right now, unfortunately. So a quick question for me here from Hosky Dex. What inspired you to move to Japan, and happy Purim? Well, happy Purim to you too. And I guess what inspired me to move to Japan was just I needed something completely different from what I was doing at that point, which was living in Los Angeles, and kind of needed to, flip my life upside down, change things, and so I can continue moving up. Spiritually and professionally and personally. And so that's what happened. I just decided to do that, and it was a drastic move, but it worked out. So here I am. All right, okay, here's a good question. So data availability is talked about as a problem to be solved in other ecosystems. This seems to be a non-issue with Ergo. Why is this the case? Alex, what do you think? Why is this the case?
Sorry, what problem? Data
availability. Yeah.
Oh, but we are talking about the data availability when we are talking about layer 2 solutions, right? And here is more or less the same, right? So it's layer 2 specific thing. So I don't quite understand why Ergo is different. Right. So what's different is the native support for trees, right? Then you can have on-chain contracts, but they're not solving problems with data availability on layer 2, right? So. The layer 1 is pretty blind about it. So yeah, something like that.
What is your take, Joe?
If I do understand the question correctly.
I'm not 100% sure I understand the question in terms of like why it's a non-issue for Ergo.
Is it a non-issue for Ergo?
No, I think that, you know, it most likely is, you know, but you're talking about communication, right? Between layer 2, layer 1. I don't know, similar bottleneck probably.
Right. All right. Well, all right. So let's kind of take this as our last question. So, why is privacy sometimes looked at as something prohibited? I see it as necessary. Imagine sending money and the person knows everything you have and has complete history of your transactions.
It's one word. The answer is one word. What does privacy interfere with? Control.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, not in a way. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's prohibited by people who see it as a threat. They see it, so you have to kind of think about it on both sides, right? So, is privacy a good thing from a personal standpoint? Yes, it is. I like my privacy. I think most people like to have their privacy. They want to have control over what kind of information gets out, right? On the other hand, you have to think about it this way, right? So how do you look at something, say, if you are, say, a law enforcement agency, right? And you need to have some sort of a way to vet, say, different types of transactions for different reasons. How do you do that, right? With just blank privacy. And so the answer to that is privacy tooling, right? So something like, say, zero knowledge proofs, right? So zero knowledge proofs, in a way, can maintain privacy, but still provide with answers to questions that need to be answered. You know, is this information correct? Are these transactions correct? Is this date correct? So basically, there is a way to fine tune and to dial in information that is, I guess, enough to verify things and to create communal safety while maintaining privacy. So I think it's just that it has to be. It can't be a black or white thing. You know, it can't be just completely anonymous. That's the only way it can go, and you don't get to hear anything about me. It's like, okay, well, you can do that as long as you want to, but as long as other entities need to have verification information, you need to have the ability to create a verifiable instance for that information. So, that's, and again, that goes back to what you just said, Joe. It's about control, right? But it's also about control, not as in cutting everything off. And I just have this black curtain over everything, but control is in what information gets served and what information doesn't get served. So that's very important, I think.
I don't know. I tend to think that,
okay, Joe, go ahead.
I think you tend to think that when you get into, let's say, a actual decentralized network that's made for everybody on the planet, we have to look at our users that are in the worst jurisdictions, right? Let's say in the US, so things are pretty comfy. And even if someone does, let's say, use a privacy tool, they have the ability to disclose that personally. It doesn't remove their ability to make that choice to let everyone see what happened. They always have that option. But when you're talking about users that are specifically in jurisdictions that, sometimes, crypto is illegal or punishable even, you need that level of, let's say, privacy to where if a user doesn't want to disclose that, good luck figuring out what happened. That actually protects people, in my opinion. Now, I get that in like legal jurisdictions, people are, operate within a rule set where they are supposed to disclose things, and they always have the ability to. They've never lost the ability to with privacy tools. They just, then you're back to the assumption of honesty. And, I think that anybody that's, filled out the tax form or whatever, you still operate with that assumption of honesty, right? I don't think privacy removes the ability to disclose something if you want to. It's just grants people that need it the ability to not need to if they don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about information leakage in a way, Joe. It's really about that. I mean, you should be able to make information that is, the means of information is necessary to verify identity, verify eligibility. But with that, you have voluntary or involuntary information leakage that happens if you use legacy data systems that do not offer adequate privacy tooling. And that's, again, where zero knowledge proofs come in and kind of change the game, I think, because it does allow for these things, these necessary verifications. But then you also get to set the norm, the paradigm, right? So what information really is needed? I don't want to give you my entire file. What information do you need? Why do you need this information? So it also creates more accountability from the parties asking for the information, I think, in the end, because you have, again, more control over what information gets, really specific control over what information gets shared and what doesn't. So what are your thoughts, Alex? All right, go ahead, Joe. I keep interrupting you because of this crazy internet delay.
I was going to pass it to Alex. I'm sure he's got his own.
All right. So if we're talking about public blockchains, I think those zero knowledge proofs are not really capable to solve any issues, right? Because usually, some trusted party is required, right? Which is doing some certification first, and then you are able to prove some data, right, in regards with that. So if we are talking about public global blockchain, then it's not the case. So usually it's pushed from guys like Vitalik, right, which is already running pushing OFAC compliant blockchain, right? Blockchain should be not be controlled by entities like nation states, right? Well, unfortunately, we see attempts from certain adversarial states, such as the US, right, to control it with OFAC compliant blockchains, and then these zero knowledge kind of proofs which couldn't work, right, with certification centers. And so on. So in regards with public blockchain, then it's still about privacy or transparency. So privacy is not always needed, right? For example, if you are running charity on the blockchain, then you are probably need for transparency, right? And that's why you are doing things on the blockchain, right? For other applications, you need for privacy. That's why in Ergo, so the privacy is optional, right? But there is support provided for building privacy-friendly tools.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it off for this week. And thanks a lot for joining me. Well, actually, this week I joined you, Joe, because you opened the whole thing. So why don't you sign it off for us this week, Joe?
All right, so on my side, I'm digging through the ErgoHab submissions, and there's a lot there. And actually, there's still a little bit that's coming in to look at, which is interesting. And I'm slow, right? I hate to tell everyone, but I'm the slowest judge. But we also have our dev update that happened yesterday. A lot of good stuff. CW and I will get together and make a video that'll be out on Sunday. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Oh, and don't forget to check out the new Ergo hack, Ergo Pulse. Ergo Pulse. Yeah, the new Ergo Pulse that we have with Marty from ErgoPad and Paideia. Anyway, check it out. It's a good episode. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.